Now, continuation of lettings activities. In the current environment, this is challenging for lettings agents, challenging for anyone who's looking to let a property, made even more challenging by an announcement from the government today that they don't want anyone to move for the foreseeable future. So, what happens to our business overall? Well, ultimately, as a landlord, I am anticipating that anything that is empty right now in my portfolio probably is going to remain empty for the next 3 months. Okay, that's ultimately a kind of fact of life at this stage. What may happen, we assume, is that if someone does need to move for a genuine reason, especially if they were key workers and things like that, the government may relax things a little bit to allow those type of people the freedom to move around. But at this stage, there's a cap or a stop on home moves and things like that. Now, that doesn't mean that things can't be agreed during this period of time for when that's relaxed a little bit, because there are people who probably do have a genuine reason to move. You think about people like students who might be still in HMO accommodation right now because they were there when the country went into lockdown. They may want to move somewhere else, especially if they're finishing their studies, if things are happening online. You may have people who need to move for employment opportunities and things like that, and they may still want to be looking at properties, at options for themselves. So naturally, at this particular point in time, no face-to-face viewings going on. That would breach the social distancing rules. But what lettings agents can still do and are doing at the moment is video tours of properties. So an empty property, the lettings agent can go into that, can take a 360-degree video tour of that property to put onto their website, to put on social media, to put onto the portals, to show people the property that they could move into. And that's a perfectly reasonable way of showing off what's available in the marketplace. Now, the lettings agent or estate agents, in the case of properties being put up on the market for sale, should not be doing that if that property is occupied, because that would breach the social distancing rules. This should only happen if the property is empty. Okay, I have seen some lettings agents, some estate agents also offering for existing occupants of the property to do a video tour themselves and use that as a way of either assessing the condition of the property or being in a position where they can maybe do a valuation over the property as well. But what's really, really key here is there shouldn't be any face-to-face contact. Okay? Now, the next thing is, if you do have an empty property at this point in time, your lettings agent can still do checks on that property to make sure that it's safe, that it's secure, that there's no problems with that property. Because if it's empty, there's no issue around breaching those social distancing rules. So they can still do checks, safety checks and things like that on any empty properties, and things like cleaning if the property was recently vacated and some cleaning needs to happen to prepare it for another tenancy whenever that may be able to go in. Those type of things can still happen. But ultimately with these things, to comply with social distancing rules, we're talking about one person going to deal with that property by themselves, as opposed to sending a group of people to deal with that property at that particular point in time. This is really what this means, trying to keep people away from each other as much as possible so we stop the spread of the coronavirus. Okay? Now, prior to the announcement the government would like to stop all home moves for the next 3 months, what was actually said is a home move should only occur if it was already pre-agreed and is necessary. So the interpretation of that, bearing in mind the government only said today that they want to stop all home moves, I haven't seen the actual legislation in relation to this yet. I haven't seen whether there are any exceptions. So one of the things to consider is possibly at this point in time, if you already had a tenant due to check into a property, if the paperwork was all done, there may be an argument that you can just finish off that home move. I think what the government is kind of saying is, let's be sensible about this. Let's not decide to have everybody moving house and have moving vans and things like that. But like I said earlier, I think there probably is an argument that, especially for key workers, if someone does need to move at this stage to be available to help in this crisis, then we should be trying to facilitate that as well at this time. Okay? Now, if a property is occupied at this stage, but the tenant has served notice to leave, then it's reasonable that that property goes on the market to re-let, even if you can't move a new tenant in immediately. But ultimately, the process with this right now is you can't go and take photographs or do a video tour. Your lettings agent can't go and do photographs or do a video tour up until the point that the current occupant has actually vacated the property. That's a key thing. So, common theme with all of these things in relation to lettings is we've got to think about ways of maintaining business activity, but in such a way that we're not interacting with other people. So, just being practical about this, using technology where possible to do video and photographic tours and things like that, absolutely fine, but not walking through a house that's occupied to record that video or photographic tour, okay, is really, really important at this particular point in time.